Good morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone. Thank you very much for joining AFRAA SkyConnect. I thank you and I appreciate your making time for this week's edition. As per the notice that was sent out in today's edition, we have two guest speakers who we will be discussing on matters tourism. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that tourism is a critical component of job creation, job creation, GDP growth, and general economic sustainability of our dear continent. But we're barely scratching the surface of tourism. And today, we're going to have two key people in this area. We're going to have ELCIA from the UN Tourism, and we're going to have Bronwen from SA Tourism. Shortly, they will introduce themselves to us properly before we get into the substance of the discussions. But note that as in previous sessions, you have the opportunity to also participate as guests in the discussion. So if you have comments or questions, please use the Q&A tab or the chat box. And at the appropriate time, I would let the guest respond to your questions or get your feedback. So thank you very much. And I do hope that the next 1 hour, you'll find it very, very beneficial for making time to be part of us today. So thank you also to my guests, ELCIA and Bronwen, for making time to be with us today. And we really appreciate your taking time to share some knowledge, such expertise with our audience who are drawn across from different spectrums of the industry, aviation, tourism, trade, and business in general, as well as in the media segment. So to start with, if I can start with ELCIA, if you can briefly introduce yourself to us, and then tell us about what you do at UN Tourism, briefly. Thank you.
A very good afternoon to you, Raphael. Good morning also to all that are connected in to the SkyConnect. It's always a pleasure to join this platform with you, Raphael, and this time also to share the insights with Bronwen. My name is ELCIA GRANDCOURT, as you have mentioned previously. I'm the director of the Africa department at UN Tourism. And the responsibility that I have is really to work with governments from all the member states of the Africa region in driving forward the tourism sector, looking at issues related to policies, related to promotions, and also in our work, it's not only liaising with governments of the different countries, but also to the private sector. And as you are aware, South Africa also is a member of UN Tourism. And especially this year, we are very proud also to be partnering as a knowledge partner with South Africa, who will be hosting the G20. And I'm actually very thrilled for this session today, because a lot of the points that probably I'm sure we will be exchanging relates to the key topics that is encapsulated in the discussions that the G20 member states will be having, which as of course includes also members from our region, but also is of a big concern to our continent, especially when it comes to tourism and travel. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you so much for that introduction. So Bronwen, if you can also introduce yourself to us briefly and what you do at SA Tourism.
My apologies.
Bronwen, you're
On
muted.
mute.
Yes, good.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for having me, Raphael, and the SkyConnect community. Really appreciate being on the chat this afternoon. My name is Bronwen Auret. I'm the Chief Quality Assurance Officer for South African Tourism. I look after supply side, which is inclusive of global trade, the quality assurance of our product, as well as the visitor experience. So thank you very much for having me. Very excited to be having this conversation. As ELCIA has alluded to, the fact that we're hosting G20 this year, tourism being a big factor in the conversations is incredibly exciting for South Africa and for the continent. And I'm very excited to hear what people want to discuss today. And I think to push our agenda of promoting one another on the continent is really important. Thank you.
Sure. So that is very good. Thank you so much for that those introductions, and I really appreciate it. Now we get into the substance of our discussion straight away. There's this hype about tourism and what it can do for us, and why we should actually embrace it and do more to get more. Just briefly, ELCIA, can you talk to us about some of the benefits of tourism?
Absolutely. I think, Raphael, you rightly said at the very beginning that tourism is a sector that creates jobs. So primarily, as we know, this is a sector that drives a lot of development as well, creation of jobs, and also giving youth opportunities. But I think what is central, if we were to look at our continent, Africa, today we know that we are a continent that is endowed with a lot of attributes, be it culturally, be it environmentally. All that we have are good recipes for us to position ourselves, our destination, and to attract visitors to our shores. And by way of promoting our destinations, positioning the products, this is where the entire community benefits, jobs are created, but there is also, as we say, there is a value chain behind the tourism sector, because once you start from the time that you step on board an airplane, to the time that you arrive at your destination, to the time that you move to your hotel, there are the different actors, stakeholders that are working together to increase and enhance the experience of a visitor to their shores. And primarily, this is not only creating jobs, but it also gives destinations opportunity to develop their infrastructure, from airports to hotels to roads, all that it is. And I think the community we're talking to today, they are very much aware of these key points. But what is essential is that once we are driving the sector, what does it mean for the people in the destination? Because everything that we do, always, we must ensure that it has a trickle effect that impacts the communities, but also brings revenue to the destination. And that is why we also make reference, once we look at the performance of a destination, is the direct contribution that the sector does to the GDP. And you've seen since COVID, I think generally speaking, when you look at our latest figures from the barometer, you can see that there has been, I can safely say, a good recovery, almost recovered from the impacts of COVID globally. But also for Africa, we've seen that the figures are growing positively. And our experts have predicted also that is supposed to continue on a positive growth trajectory.
But thanks for that. Bronwen, if you look at it, I think I was reading somewhere that in terms of regional performance or attractiveness of tourists, Africa doesn't seem to be attracting as much as it ought to. What could be informing that? Is it that we don't have the right attractions? Is it that we don't have the right destinations? What could be the issue there?
Raphael, I love that question. I think post-COVID, we really did have a moment to reconsider our tourism, who we are attracting in South Africa, and who we would like to attract in the future. And it was such an enlightening moment because we have our traditional markets that we attract. And the truth is, there's so much opportunity for us to promote intra-Africa travel. We have forecast that by 2030, 70% of our travel arrivals will come from the continent. And we're not quite there yet. It has been an incredibly great experience for us to continue developing our opportunities within the continent for the continent. Now, what are the things that we can do to really stimulate that? And I would beg to differ that the big job to be done is to make sure that we can make sure there's connectivity between African countries. In some instances, we are still finding we are going to have to fly off the continent to get back into another country in the continent. And I think it just makes sense that we continue to visit one another. Yes, there are many markets that are attracted to South Africa for different reasons. And it's very exciting when we can start sharing our cultures and our experiences and our products. And I think fundamentally, we need to continue to do that by encouraging the travel through creating the connections and the aviation connection very specifically.
Interesting. And I think it is for this reason that the single African air transport market, the AU, one of the AU flagship project, is in to actually try and ensure that we have better access on the continent. But you touch on something very significant for me. ELCIA, on the African continent, you know, we don't seem to visit each other. And even probably, I don't know whether it's an orientation problem, but when an African visits another African country, you are not seen as a tourist. Even if you are spending top dollar. But if a white person or a non-African visits the continent, then we see tourism. Now, what informs this and how can we begin to correct it?
Raphael, this is interesting because as an African, you're saying this, and we know that this is the feeling, the general feeling, but it's a perception. It's a perception because the very same way that those tourists coming to our destinations, sometimes the first question, if you would name any country, the first question they will ask you whether it is safe, right? Or how connected is it? But also it's perception. It's because we don't have enough information. Yes, there are challenges, there are issues, there are geopolitical activities that we know is going ahead in the region, but it doesn't necessarily concentrate it. Africa is a continent in itself with 54 member states. But if somebody is going to go to a country in Europe, this is not the first question that is being asked. They will ask, so what are you planning to do there, etc., etc. But it's because we ourselves are to blame. Most of the time we are to blame because we should be owning our own narrative. We should not be shy to go out there and talk about our assets. I mean, you and me and Bronwen and most of the colleagues that are from the region connected knows that if I go to South Africa, wow, I can enjoy a nice beach, but as well as I can do other activities such as safari. And if I move next door to Namibia, to Kenya, you name it, and if you go further up on the continent, there's a lot to do. Yes, we have challenges. We are not really that well connected, as has been alluded to. We have issues when we want to facilitate the entry related to visa. But this is why you have bodies such as AU, through the mechanism that they have through the SATAM, is trying to ease all of these, let's say, hurdles to be able to create the environment. But I think primarily to respond to your question, I still and strongly believe it's a perception, and it's up to us to work towards putting our best assets forward, marketing what we have, so that we can continue to attract the tourists to come to our destination and even maximize, because you said so yourself. Today we have roughly about a 7% growth if you look at the total number of arrivals. But can we do more? Yes, but it's not only growing the numbers, it's also ensuring that when the tourist lands in our destination, they are spending their dollar, because this would be related to the tourism receipts, the revenues that is collected, and also to create jobs, because most of the time we talk about the leakages. You have the big hotels, the big brands, but if you have guests only staying in the hotel but not having the opportunity to enjoy the activities, and this is where your product diversification comes in. We should create the activities. We know that in South Africa we can have a nice experience with a hot air balloon, you know, can go. So I think it still remains a perception, but that's why we should also use all the efforts that we have, use the media also in a way to position our destinations, and also Africa as the destination for you to choose for your holiday. And even why not do a combination of safari, of beach, and also now, just to round up, we see that people coming for business are combining pleasure. So I would still say it's a perception, but we have to work around it to shift that narrative.
Good. I like that. We need to work at it. So, Bronwen, based on working around it, you have a target of attracting 20% intra-Africa tourism into South Africa. So, what are the drivers to this?
Rafael, so we're targeting about 70% by 2030. The big drivers, I think ELCIA has hit the nail on the head. We need to make sure we attract our travelers from the rest of Africa into South Africa. There's some key components in that equation. You know, we've had the visa waiver for Kenya, Ghana, and I think we are continuing that narrative, and we have seen such great response from taking these barriers away. Now the job is to manage perception and to make it attractive, and I'm really saying intra-Africa attractive. So it's one thing, we have quite a robust tourism sector in South Africa. We have vast product range. We can offer a summer experience and a fabulous safari winter experience. So we know the seasons, we know how to attract the different markets, etc. And I think there's a big role to be played amongst the DMOs about cross-promoting one another. That travel both ways is really, really important. And I think there is so much more to see, not just in South Africa, but across the continent. And how many Africans or South Africans I meet that have not ventured very far beyond SADC. And I think to myself, but it's a huge continent. What is prohibiting us? So yes, my job is to attract everyone to South Africa, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of value in us working together as a continent to position the continent. I really need to emphasize this. We are not on our own. And the theme of G20 is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. And I think tourism has the power to achieve all three of those objectives. And I think it does such wonderful good for the entire continent. We raise one another up. We raise the quality of the tourism product. We make sure that the range of product is understood. We're all going to benefit from it. And I really think it's not just a South African mandate. I think as a continent, we need to work together so that we can grow the tourism sector. It is one of the easier ways to win with GDP for every country.
Thank you so much. So I see clearly, because the potential in Africa is huge, and we need just to make sure that we use the right levers to make our attractions available out there. South Africa does very well. You go to the South African embassies and it's well branded with what you can see when you go to South Africa. Many of the other African embassies, you walk into the embassy and there's nothing at the front desk, at the front office. You don't sort of get a feel of, when I go to this country, what am I likely to see? So I'm also thinking that for the tourism promoter, we should try and use our embassies because those are our external links to the rest of the continent where we can showcase the attractions that we have on our continent. But having said that, let me get to this other aspect, which also seems to be a big constraint, the cost to tourism. There is the cost of travel within Africa, and there's also the cost of visas. Now, how are we going to deal with, if we have to attract Africa, if we have to bring more tourists across African countries, then we need to deal with these issues. I know there is the protocol on free movement of people and goods, which is intended to ease visa restrictions. I know a few countries, like Bronwen mentioned, South Africa is relaxing its visa regimes, visa policies, and in some cases, it's actually waiving visa for certain African countries. These are the policies that we need to, but they're trickling in my view. What can we do to spare the momentum? ELCIA?
Raphael, I think this question of cost has always been there. And more so now, you would agree that after COVID, we've seen an explosion in terms of the price parity in the flight tickets, going to destinations that has doubled, tripled compared to what it was in the past. And it's very difficult once the price goes up to bring it back down. But of course, you and me, we know there's a lot of elements around that is driving these factors. But I think what you said at the very beginning, what these mechanisms like the SATAM is trying to push to facilitate is primarily to bring more connectivity to the continent, which will eventually help to reduce cost, but also enhance the connectivity and access between countries. We meet in a lot of forums and we talk about this, but there is also the real issue of countries taking ownership and having that political will as well from the leaders of the different countries. But with that said, I think over the years we have seen progress because slowly we are seeing that a lot of countries are doing a lot to facilitate entry to their destinations, be it that you can get a visa online, which reduces already the cost of you having to travel to an embassy to get that, or to receive visa upon arrival. So you've seen lately, I think the latest one, biggest one that we saw on the continent was from Ghana, but there are so many other countries that have moved towards this, Rwanda, Benin, and then of course there's also the regional bloc, like we talk about the SADC, the ECOWAS, that there's a certain number of countries that can enter without having the need of a visa. So there are different steps that are being taken, but we need to increase the efforts. And also when it comes to the cost, I think I'm not an expert in in the travel industry, but we know that the associated costs are also to the cost of fuel, are also to the different fees that is there. But I think there is a way to encourage countries to continue these negotiations, to open more their skies, to allow for more airlines to come in, and also to encourage the low cost between countries. That would boost also the intra-Africa travel that we talk about. And I think also post-COVID, we've seen a lot of that happening because when we were not receiving visitors from Europe, which is primarily the source market for most destinations, it was the intra-Africa travel that was really sustaining the tourism growth on the continent, including domestic travels within the different destinations itself.
Okay, so Bronwen, do you have something to add on this?
Yes, Raphael, I think it's really important that, I mean, when we need to be intentional about our actions, and I think the work is commencing to relax the visa regime. ALCIA is speaking about how we can look at more digital systems. From South Africa's perspective, we've certainly made progress in that space. Is it fast enough? Probably not for most of us, but there has been marked improvement. And I'm seeing that progress, and I think it's really, really exciting. What we do need to do, though, is continue to find ways to make it work. And I think finding ways to make it work, despite the challenges that we have, is something we can focus on. As South African Tourism, we host Africa's Travel Indaba, which is in May this year, where we invite the continent to exhibit their travel and tourism trade, participate in the Global Tourism Network. It's the third largest show on the continent. And what we then do is we invite everybody to engage, have the discussions, meet buyers, very importantly, meet buyers, so that we can stimulate the demand. You know, it sometimes is a little bit chicken and egg in the airline negotiation space, the demand creation versus the flights. And from our perspective, where we can affect the demand, we certainly do need to support it so that those routes can be developed, the prices can come down, we can find new market entrants. If there is a cheaper solution to connect SADC as an example, it would be incredibly welcomed by the entire region. So I think our job is to continue to have the conversations and connect the individuals so that the individual negotiations can happen, and from a policy perspective to support the political principles to get the bilaterals in place to support these initiatives.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Now let's get into another area which is quite a bit of a concern for many African tourists, in particular, the level of service delivery as against the cost. Oftentimes, the promotion and packaging is so good, so nice, but what you actually get falls short of what you actually expected. And it sort of does not give a good image of the destination, so to speak. So what can we do in terms of service quality to ensure that at least tourists are getting value for money, irrespective of where they go? ELCIA, do you want to start?
Yes, I think the point that you raise, we all familiar with that, because there is a big issue when it comes to skills development, human capital on the continent, because especially when it comes to the tourism sector, because most oftentimes we see that it's not the first choice of someone to go into the tourism sector as aspire to work in the tourism sector. But I think there are a couple of things that needs to be taken into account, that we need to have the right framework to allow for the youth to be trained and skilled to be able to give that service delivery, that high quality service that you talk about, which will equate the price that the clients are paying, so value for money as well. But I think there's still a lot more to be done in this area on our continent, and we should not be shy to address this and realize that we need to create the right framework, the right environment. We need to have the right academies, the right schools to be able to train our youth to be able to enter in that tourism sector. And that is why, if you look a little bit at the work that we are doing, education is one of the core pillars of the themes that we push forward. And we've been working with several member states now in positioning different academies that have specialized areas in the tourism sector. Only last year, we, together with Zimbabwe, we are working now to position an academy that looks at the culinary skills. Also with Zambia, There's an academy that is, in fact, the framework is being put to support with the capacity building and training of various areas in the tourism sector. But I think what is important also is to consider the different stakeholders that are coming to invest in the continent, that they can also look at these areas to invest in building the capacities, and that will also help alleviate that instead of moving elsewhere, we will have that job creation, that like I say, the right environment for people to thrive and continue to benefit from the sector. But it remains a fact that we yet to be able to achieve that level that we all talk about. Of course, a lot of countries are trying and are giving that service delivery. But when we talk generally, I think we realize that there is a lack on this side, and that the key to it is training. And we've seen during COVID that a lot of reskilling had to be done because people lost jobs and moved within the industry. And what we've been doing also with some countries is to do a mapping, because a lot of our work, as I said in the beginning, is to do with the policies. So we've been doing mapping to look at the human capital development, especially within the tourism sector, in regards to the demand and what we have to feed into the sector. So I think it's an ongoing work, and a lot of countries are taking this up to really position their destinations as a destination that offers that right level of service that equates also the pricing that we put on the products.
Thank you. Bronwen, I think your role sort of zeroes in around quality assurance and standards. What do you think we need to do?
Raphael, I think in South Africa, we have the Tourism Grading Council. And what we do is we put together the norms and standards for different accommodation providers, formal, informal, and it covers quite a big range, including venues and function areas. We are looking to expand that into product and experience. But what I'm finding really important is that from a quality assurance perspective, the standards and the star grading, there's a lot of work to be done across the continent for us to work together. We have global brands that come in, and I think there are different measures. There is no global benchmark in principle for star grading. And I think that is where we can work together once again, so that we can have the norms and standards that our consumers demand. And I think that's the one thing I have to emphasize, is that as much as that, I'd love to tell you, I sit in a room with my team and we come up with norms and standards. We actually have a very consultative process where it is determined by the tourism sector. And I think that is the big opportunity here, is that we extend that thinking beyond South Africa, across the continent, and perhaps ELCIA with the UN Tourism, we can work on something like this, because I think it's a fantastic opportunity. We're all working towards standards that we have set, that we are going to give a great experience, because at the end of the day, that is the quality assurance that the consumer is looking for when they're paying for a trip, whether it's business or leisure. The consumer wants to know, when I book this trip, am I going to get what I expect? And if we work together on the continent to make sure that those standards are the same wherever we go, we're going to have satisfied customers. And when there is an unhappy customer, we have, as an industry, an African tourism industry, a way in which to engage in a constructive manner to say, perhaps it needs to be adapted, or perhaps we need to work with our colleagues in the industry to raise the standard in particular areas. And I think it must be seen as a tool. It's not a punitive measure. It's a measure to ensure that we can maximize the customer experience. And for us, that is so important. Not something that is used in a terrible way for anyone who's not delivering. It's actually used in a very positive way to say, colleagues, if our consumers are needing a particular level of standard, how are we going to apply it across the industry? And I think that is an important conversation for us to start having right now and developing very, very quickly so that we can make sure more customers are spending more money.
Thanks so much. You know, I like the angle we pursue in this discussion. I mean, because it's bringing up the real issues and how we need to deal with them. And ELCIA earlier talked about capacity building as one area through which we can actually fix some of the quality issues significantly. But because when you look around the continent, we don't have many, for instance, hospitality training facilities. We don't have many tourism training facilities. I know in South Africa you do, I know in Kenya and a few other countries, and that's it. So there is. Now, how can we ensure that we have more of these facilities around so that we can, should it be private sector driven, or should these be something that state, realizing the employment opportunities, should come in and create the facilities and provide the training to support the industry? What do you think? Let's start with you, Bronwen, before I get to ELCIA.
Raphael, that's a great question. I think it needs a bit of both, to be honest with you. So in South Africa, we have great government programs to help facilitate the education, transformation, and development of the tourism sector. Our colleagues at the Department of Tourism are really great at this, and we have these formal programs that go into play. But likewise, I think it is beholden to the private sector to also initiate programs for the upskilling and education of potential employees in the tourism sector. So not everything is a degreed course. Some of it is a short skills course so that people can get in and get out really quickly, be able to develop their skill set over time. And I think there's a big opportunity where I'm seeing some big hotel groups introducing programs. And I think the combination of the two is really important. Where I believe there's an opportunity, Raphael, is for us to promote that. So I was, in fact, having a conversation with my team to say, we should just have a portal that tells young people, here are the 50 opportunities that you can take advantage of, and provide the inspiration for them to really apply and be able to go and get some work skills experience. The tourism sector does offer that. And again, that's something that I would like to pursue and see how we can make it more exposed, because the skills that we learn, it doesn't need to be, again, a degreed course. It could be a simple service skill one learns that you apply across many different countries across the continent, and we grow this whole tourism economy together.
Thank you. ELCIA, your thoughts?
I totally agree with Bronwen. It's definitely a mix of both, because we know that tourism is a sector that is driven by the private sector. But of course, you need the public sector to provide those framework that Bronwen is talking about, to set the standards, so that then the private sector can come in and drive it. And I think she explained it perfectly well in the sense that we need to continue to encourage that, because once you train, she's talking about quick courses, vocational courses that can be done. And that is why we've also, as I mentioned, through our academy, we're providing these kind of short courses. And of late, when we talk about using technology, one new initiative that we've launched, and it's already been piloted, but it was in another region in the Americas that soon we will populate it, is look, to just use WhatsApp and to create short courses whereby a group of taxi drivers have been able to be trained, because people are on the move. They are already working and they don't have time to allocate to go and sit down and go through textbooks and everything. You make it more pragmatic, more practical, and they can have short bursts. But this is at the same time as a refresher, but also boosting a new young entrepreneur that wants to go into the sector. And there's a lot of initiatives that is coming out from our youth. Let's not forget that this is one of the youngest continent that we have, with the population with the age of 25, and that you have a lot of hunger from the youth,
yes,
wanting to own that space, but we need to give them that opportunity and we need to encourage them. And our work relates a lot to this. And as Bronwen widely said, and you said, we used to talk about we used to have reference school from the continent. I mean, AFRAA being based in Kenya, you know, Utali College once upon a time was a referred to tourism college that most of the people were being trained in. But over the years, each country has been doing their own thing. But I think now a lot of countries are also looking at repositioning the different institutions they have, but also bringing in private sector to partner with in order to be able, like a lot of these big brands that operate on the continent, they have their own online virtual universities, Hilton, for example.
Yeah.
So once they come into the continent, we must try to tap into these resources and also help to capacitate our youth so that we retain also the talent and that everybody also benefits from the sector.
Thank you so much. Now let me go to our audience. Seeing some very interesting questions coming in already. Let's review those and then we continue. The first one is from Abdul Isyak. Abdul says, very interesting discussion, and all he's hearing is the need for collaboration and collaboration and collaboration. Now, he is a startup in the travel and tourism sector. He's just wondering, how can he, his entity, his small organization, participate in realizing this goal of collaboration to achieve the ultimate of bringing in more tourism to the continent? I don't know who of you want to take it.
I can
Small organizations in the tourism sector, is there a role for them to play in actually supporting and driving the bigger picture?
There most certainly is. And Raphael, I would encourage that Abdul comes to Africa's Travel Indaba and connects with people. There's no limitation to whom you can connect with. You can set up meetings. So when you register, you can set up meetings with the people that you want to meet with. And the point is to make sure those quality connections happen. There's a big role for startups. Startups are seeing business problems and they're solving for business problems that the more traditional businesses can't see, or they're too big to pay attention to. And that is their opportunity. And that's what I would recommend is, please come to Africa's Travel Indaba, register on the website, come and meet with people and get your product positioned accordingly.
Absolutely. I would complement that also to what Bronwen said, because a lot of initiatives that we put out are to do with encouraging startups. And we've launched several challenges and startup competitions. And if I would remember well, the latest one now that we've launched is a startup competition related to AI. So if you also go into our website, UN Tourism website, you will see all of this. You could enroll to participate in that. But we are encouraging a lot of the youth. And let me just add, moving a little bit to the institutional roles that we play also within the work that we do, our Regional Commission for Africa, where we group together, we bring together the ministers of tourism. This year will be hosted in Nigeria, in Abuja, in the month of June, 11 to 13 of June. And good news is that the thematic will be on how we can boost the tourism sector through AI innovation, and also to boost, let's not forget, we have a creative industry that is very important within the tourism sector in our continent. So take a look at what is going on onto our website or connect directly to us. But as Bronwen said, there are also all these tourism fairs. Sometimes you don't need to be in the big ones, but within the continent, in addition to Indaba, you have other small tourism fairs where you get the opportunity to network and connect with people. So you should use all these opportunities that are out there to continue to make the contribution that you want to do in that space, in the tourism sector. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So Isaac, you got the reassurance, the support you need, please. The Indaba is in May, I think. So please do make it a point, go to South Africa, and you would not regret. You will find other colleagues that you can network with and you can engage with, and it can transform what you are doing collaboratively. Now, our next question is from Barry Kashambo, one of our emeritus aviators on the continent. And Barry is saying, why are we talking about these visa issues? This was something that was supposed to have been resolved since 2018. We were supposed to actually abandon visas across the continent, but this is still happening. Okay, that notwithstanding, we also know that within the context of the AU Agenda 2063, the issue of visas on arrival is not what is required. It is either visa waivers, absolute visa waivers, not on arrival. Though visa on arrival is a positive step, but we should be looking at the ultimate. But the point he actually wants to drive, the question he wants to you guys to respond to is, how can we bring the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the, I don't know, he mentioned WTO, so I'm not too sure whether it's World Tourism Organization or World Trade Organization. So I'm not too sure about that, but I would want to say, because we're dealing in tourism, he meant World Tourism Organization, Africa Continental Free Trade. How can these two organizations be brought on board to ensure that tourism, trade, labor, and aviation sector work together? Okay, so I think it's now World Trade Organization, I think, because it's talking about how can we ensure that the Africa Continental Free Trade Organization, the World Trade Organization be brought on board to partner with the tourism, trade, labor, and aviation sectors to ensure that we make some progress. ELCIA, what do you think?
Thank you, Raphael. I just wanted to, before I go to his question, if you look in the chat, one of my colleagues have put the link to the challenge, just to give a head start to what I alluded to earlier for the gentleman who asked the first question. Now, the second point that Mr. Barry raised, you know, we just went through a rebranding. We're now UN Tourism. So it makes it easier not to get confused with World Trade and UN and Tourism. But with that said, we all know that tourism is a transversal sector. When you talk trade, you're talking tourism. When you're talking connectivity, you're talking tourism. So it's all interconnected. And the good news is that, Mr. Barry, we are already working together. And a lot of our work is through advocacy, because we've collaborated on several fronts. For example, with AFRAA themselves, we have a cooperation agreement with all the regional recs. When we talk about AFCAC, even AFCTA, with the African Union, we are part of the discussions when this is happening. And we are doing a lot of advocacy, especially when it comes to the visa facilitation. And we are happy when we see that countries have moved. It's going to be a process. It will not happen overnight, and we have to agree with that. But at least we see that it is happening. We cannot talk about what was not, but we have to look ahead of what we can do together going forward. And I think more and more, if you look at the continent itself and you look at the countries that are putting the focus, that are investing in the tourism sector, it has shifted throughout the years. A lot more countries are really looking at tourism because they've seen that the sector really is a transformative sector, and that it impacts also on the economy, but also because we didn't touch on the aspect of sustainability. The environment, we have to take that into consideration as well. So we are part of the discussions, and let me also share here that very soon we will have the second edition of a conference on the thematic tourism and air connectivity in Africa. And this conference is being done in collaboration with ICAO. So it's bringing together ministers of tourism and ministers of transport to discuss and look at, because there you will have the key decision makers at the ministerial level, the policy makers, that will, it's not only a matter of having the discussion, but also looking at a roadmap, a strategic approach to how we can continue to bring all these different bodies and recs together, so that at least we can continue to increase and implement the strategies that are being laid down, because I think a big part of it is the implementation, and you really need to have different countries taking the political will, the willingness to take this forward. So Angola will be the proud host of the second edition, because the first one was in Cabo Verde, and that will be in the month of July, towards the end of July. So again, watch us follow on our website, because we will announce this, and most welcome to participate and engage with us and continue the discussion, and really encouraging that we move to the next step, which is implementation, because I think this is what he's alluding to here. It's like, let's move from just talking and having the strategies, but let's get the legwork done. So yes, this is what I can add to his question.
Thank you. Let me get the next question to Bronwen. Now, look, we talk about Africa having the youngest population, and the point is someone wants to know, what is the tourism sector doing to ensure that this opportunity and potential is harnessed to its maximum? So I don't know, from the Southern Africa perspective or South Africa perspective, what are you doing to ensure that the youthful populations are harnessed for the benefit of tourism?
Thank you, Raphael. I think it's the reality is we have a very young population. The first thing is job creation, and I think to include the youth in the tourism sector is really, really important. From a South Africa perspective, we have quite a few different programs that look at bringing small, medium enterprises and creating job opportunities for those in the tourism sector so that they can be engaged in it. So I think the reality is that we've probably not done enough, and we need to do a lot more, and we acknowledge this. So we have a program, for example, within the Grading Council, which is called Basic Quality Verification, where we verify homestays. We go to communities to train youth from the community on how to become accredited assessors for that program. So we need to do more and more of those very intentional interventions to make sure that everyone feels a part of the tourism economy. And I believe that is the challenge, is for the continent and within South Africa. Making sure everyone is a part of the tourism economy is not just about traveling to a destination. It's about creating the opportunities within the value chain. And every single person within tourism has to be mindful of that and has to be inclusive and give everyone a seat at the table. It sounds a little bit obvious, but I always feel that I have to call it out. Because when people have been in business for a long time, they sometimes forget to open the door. Like the first question we had from a startup, how do we get a seat at the table? We welcome you, come in, we want you to participate. everybody is welcome. Thank you, Raphael.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So again, let me get back to you, ELCIA. This question is from Aaron Munetsi, and he's saying, look, in fact, we're talking about intra-Africa tourism. It's not even low-hanging fruit. Actually, this is a windfall. And we just toying with. But he thinks the challenge is how to get government departments to work together. So the question is, how are we working as to bring the tourism ministries and transport and foreign affairs and finance into one room to discuss and agree on a strategy of growing intra-Africa tourism? ELCIA, you have an event coming up.
Thank you, and hello to my good friend Aaron, and thank you for the question because.
But briefly, our time is almost up, and time is almost up. So
yes, but I think as you said, Aaron is very much aware of this, and he hits it right on the nail. I think at a national level, this should already be happening. Countries, you know, you've got the different ministries. It's important to bring the different relevant ministries together, because tourism, first of all, is transversal, as we said. But when we're having the discussion, and oftentimes you hear ministers saying that they are lonely as ministers because of tourism, because majority of time they're not taken as it's a serious sector. But I think post-COVID, countries have realized, as I said earlier, that transformative power of the tourism sector, and they are relooking at this. So this should first of all happen at a national level. But on our side, what we're doing is specifically what I shared earlier, is the second edition of this forum. Yes, we're bringing only transport and tourism, but we are hoping that once these two ministries come together, they might as well encourage others to also come. But at least it's a start, and we've already engaged that discussion, and we look forward to welcoming you all in Angola in July.
Okay, great. So there's a forum. UN Tourism is already on top of it. They're bringing all the relevant stakeholders together. Come to Angola, and you would be pleasantly impressed to see what African ministers will come up with. Now, there are so many other questions, but unfortunately, our time is up. So, and we haven't also finished our main text, but I don't like to stretch this discussion. So what I would want us to do at this point is, my apologies to those whose questions I've not been able to pick. We'll try to do so next time. But I'll get back to my audience just to get from each of you, what would be your parting message to our audience? What should Africa be doing to maximize return from tourism? What should our contributions be as stakeholders? Starting with Bronwen, you want to start, or ELCIA? Either of you can just get it.
Sure, Raphael.
In 1 minute.
Yeah, look, I think as ELCIA says, tourism is a transversal. It has the power to really change the futures of everyone on this continent. I would really strongly encourage the collaboration and conversation. You are never too big or too small to learn something new. I love the value of this conversation. I wish we could talk more, but please do come to Africa's Travel Indaba. The second G20 tourism meeting will be held there. I think all the collaborative conversations that are required are happening. Maybe not as fast as we would like them to be, but we need to be there to stimulate the urgency. So please do come to Africa's Travel Indaba, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So ELCIA, also in 1 minute, your parting shot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Raphael, Bronwen, what will I say to the audience is that tourism is everybody's business. It's not just the international organization, or it's not just the tourism ministry. It's everybody's business. We all have a stake in this sector. So let's continue to encourage, and let's continue to work together. And it starts with us first, so that then it trickles. It is everybody's business. So let's own it as well. And I will encourage you all to visit our websites, because there you see a lot of the different initiatives and activities that we are doing, not just at the continental level, but globally as well, because we touch on various thematics related to the sector. And by closing, to all the women out there, I know over the weekend we will celebrate Happy Women's Day. And today I had my good friend Bronwen to share this platform with. And thank you to you, Raphael, and also AFRAA for always giving us that space to share a little bit of what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we draw the curtains. Unfortunately, time will not allow us to go beyond, and I do appreciate your understanding. This conversation has attracted so much interest, and I think we will not just end here. We'll find another time to continue from where we are leaving off today. But until then, I thank you all very much for your participation, for your contribution, your comments. There have been a lot of positive comments, which unfortunately I could not read out due to time. And the questions that we could not respond to, my apologies, but please do join us next time. Until we meet again next month.